It always seems like there's so much to learn on guitar, but often it really helps to zone in on just one or two notes, and that's what we're going to do here. You'll find that focusing on just one little bluesy move can inspire a full solo like this. So by the end of this video, you're going to learn the 4 key techniques that I was using in that solo. But first, let's take a look at the key musical idea, an essential blues move, the shift from minor to major. Now when we take a chord like this, G here, the difference between it being a minor and a major is with our second finger here on the G string. So take that off, we get G minor, add it back on, we get G major. Now this little move, from minor up to major, is really essential for the blues sound. So let's make that a G7 by taking our little finger off as well. With that hammer on, 3rd to 4th fret on the G string, you really get that bluesy flavour. Here again on a C chord up here, and on a D chord. And there we go. This little move is going to underpin everything we see in this video. Now a quick disclaimer that all the techniques you're about to see I've shown in previous videos, but seeing them with this laser focus on this move from minor to major third might really help to embed them into your playing. So let's get into our first technique, the hammer on. Now we can just hammer on from 3rd up to 4th fret on the G string there, and that's absolutely fine. But to bring this to life a bit more, let's bring in some more notes. So let's take all of these 3 notes on the D, G and B strings here at the 3rd fret, and then we can hammer on just on the G string up to the 4th fret and make that transition from minor to major. Now with this, it can also work as playing them just as pairs. So let's just try that with just the G and B strings together, like so, or just the D and G strings together. Just slightly different sounds there. And then we can also add in any of these 3 notes at the 5th fret with that. So D, G and B strings there. This really spells out a C major triad, but that operates just as a good way to pivot between this G chord moving from minor to major and this C major chord, a nice little pivot there, like so. So again, we can just play on the G and B strings together, like so, or D and G strings, however we like, or all 3 together. Then another thing we can do is trill the hammer on. So alternating really fast between the 3rd and 4th frets there on the G string, but with other notes in play as well. And then maybe with that pivot to the 5th fret as well. Something like so. That works really well to add some energy to your solo. Now everything so far has been around our 1 chord of G down here, but then when we move up to the 4 chord of C here at the 8th fret, we can just do exactly the same moves, but around that new chord position. Again, 5 chord of D here at the 10th fret, works just the same. So this is really flexible to move throughout the blues progression. Now let's hear this in action with the backing track, and just listen how this approach really bridges the gap between lead and rhythm. Next up, let's look at sliding. Now of course we can simply slide from 3 up to 4 on the G string there to give us our move from minor to major. And that works great in licks like this. But what I want to show you is something slightly more sophisticated, where we combine this slide with a 6th above our root note of G there at the 3rd fret on the high E string. So slide 3 to 4 on the G string, and then 3 on the high E string, whilst continuing to hold this note, the B, at the 4th fret of the G string there. Now this really nicely outlines this G major chord, but in a nice bluesy way. And 2 ways I really like to use this is firstly a lick like this, where I'm just bringing in some other notes from the G chord, so 3 and 3 at the B and high E strings there, with maybe a hammer on and pull off to 5 on the B string, and then importantly coming down to 5 on the G string here, the 4th of C. Now this is a really nice move from 4th of C to the minor 3rd of B flat, sliding back up to the major 3rd of B, and then resolving to that high G there on the top E. So something like so, really nice. And the other way I like to use this is to brighten up a more minor sounding lick. So there I've got a rundown, a variant of the G minor scale, but then it really brightens up into major with that little slide at the end. So I won't go through the whole lick, but if you know your G minor blues scale around here, then any lick you can just brighten up with that little slide and sixth at the end. And once again, this works on the other chords in the blues progression. So that was our 1 chord of G there at the 3rd fret, and then up to the 8th fret for the 4 chord of C. Exactly the same move, 10th fret for the 5 chord of D. Exactly the same again. So now let's put this in context with the track. Now let's stick with the slide, but this time 2 notes at once. So this time we're going to be playing a chromatic double stop. So here's our slide, 3 to 4 on the G string, minor to major 3rd. We're going to double this up with the note 1 fret below on the B string. So we're starting here with 3 on the G, 2 on the B, sliding up 1 fret to 4 on the G, 3 on the B. Now these 2 notes here come directly from our G major chord, so really we're just sliding into the chord, but with this chromatic movement from 1 fret below. Then we can slide back and forth as many times as we like. Now we can either give those each their own note value, like quite slowly like that, or quite a quick movement there, like a grace note, so, or, okay. Then once again we can pivot up to 5 and 5 on the G and B strings together there. Get the idea, which really brings out a lot more movement and turns this into a fully fledged lick. And as ever, it's just the same around the C chord at the 8th fret and the D chord at the 10th. We just need to reposition the lick to fit the chord. And once again, let's hear that with the track. Now let's look at bending that minor 3rd up to the major 3rd. Now we can take our minor 3rd, hit at the 3rd fret on the G string, and bend it up to hit the major 3rd, which would be at the 4th fret, that same note. We get to it if we bend up half a step. But part of the bluesy flavour is kind of finding some of those in-between notes, so we can kind of go quite slowly, and we don't always need to get all the way up to that major 3rd, but always kind of pushing the minor 3rd slightly sharp is a classic blues sound. Then if you resolve down to the root note here of G at the 5th fret on the D string, that's really just a classic blues lick in its own right. There, but what I'm doing is also combining around some of these other notes in this box, 3 and 5 on the D string with 3 and 5 on the G string. Any of those notes together with that little bend on the 3rd fret of the G string there works really great for a million blues licks. Now at this point I probably don't even need to say it, but up to the 8th fret for the C chord works exactly the same, and then 10th fret for the D, just the same again. So here are these bends with the track. Finally, let's bring everything together into a full solo and see how this simple concept of minor to major gives us so much musical potential.